in the sense that, President Biden is having a better night than even many Democrats thought he was going to have. We're not done yet, but as we get, where are we now? 20 past midnight, so happy Wednesday.
So let's talk about Fetterman for 1 second, because I think a lot of people thought that, first of all, Oz had momentum going into the race, especially after the Senate debate, where Fetterman had difficulty. And also just that Fetterman's stroke was going to really end his chances.
And by the way, the thing I love about this morning is that so much was wrong about what we all thought and the media thought was going to happen today, which of course makes this morning so interesting and elections so dramatic and entertaining.
And Anderson, this midterm election here in Nevada is like no other. In 2020, Nevada went into a universal vote mail ballot. And what that means is that every registered voter, all 1.8 million, unless they opted out, got a ballot in the mail. And so long as they postmarked their ballot yesterday, it could get counted up to Saturday. And so we don't know how many of those ballots were put in the mail yesterday, Anderson, but we know that they're going to be counted. They're going to be counted until Saturday. And that's how democracy works here in Nevada.
We do know some far-right voices have been seizing on the fact that counting in Maricopa County, which makes up 60% of registered voters in Arizona, was temporarily delayed because of issues with tabulation devices at 60 of the county's 223 voting locations, so not all of them. Now, we've learned the problem was with printers there, and they weren't printing dark enough on the ballot. But officials stress no voters were turned away. All those votes that may have been impacted will be counted, and Maricopa is telling us they expect to have 95 to 99% of all ballots counted by Friday. But the county is bracing for possible legal action. In addition to Lake, the Republican candidates for Senate, Secretary of State, and Attorney General are all election deniers. CNN has not called any of these races yet, Anderson.
We also have about 17,000 ballots left to count from Election Day. And these are ballots that did not go through the tabulator. They were not read by the tabulator for some reason. But they were brought down by bipartisan boards, Republicans and Democrats, down to our central count facility. And those will also be counted later on this week.
Mr. President, do you think Elon Musk is a threat to U.S. national security? And should the U.S. and with the tools you have investigate his joint acquisition of Twitter with foreign governments, which include the Saudis?
I think that Elon Musk's cooperation and/or technical relationships with other countries is worthy of being looked at. Whether or not he is doing anything inappropriate, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that it's worth being looked at. But that's all I'll say.
And just a quick one. Obviously, a lot of attention on 2024 now that the votes have been cast in the midterms. 2/3 of Americans in exit polls say that they don't think you should run for re-election. What is your message to them, and how does that factor into your final decision about whether or not to run for re-election?
It doesn't.
What's your message to them? To those 2/3 of Americans?
Watch me.
Okay, one more. Very quickly. We saw Governor Ron DeSantis with a resounding victory in Florida last night. Who do you think would be the tougher competitor, Ron DeSantis or former President Trump? And how is that factoring into your decision?
It'll be fun watching them take on each other.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also have a question for you about China. But before I do, I just wanted to follow up on something you said earlier. When you said it remains to be seen whether the Ukraine government is prepared to compromise with Russia. Previously, you've told us the only thing for the Russians to do is get completely out of Ukraine, go back to the lines that existed prior to February 24. Are you suggesting with the word compromise that you think that there is room for territorial compromise now?
No, I'm not. See, that's up to the Ukrainians. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine.
what kind of compromise do you have in mind?
I didn't have any in mind. You have asked the question whether or not, if I recall, whether or not what would happen if, in fact, after this, I think the context is that whether or not they're pulling back from Fallujah and from the Kherson, the city of Kherson, and they're coming back across the river to the eastern side of the river, the Russian forces. And I said, what's going to happen is they're going to all both lick their wounds, decide what they're going to do over the winter, and decide whether or not they're going to compromise. That's what's going to happen, whether or not. I don't know what they're going to do. But I do know one thing, we're not going to tell them what they have to do.
You were asked before about your meeting with President Xi. At this point, the Chinese government, by the estimate of the Pentagon, is getting ready to bring their force of nuclear weapons up to over 1,000 weapons, significant increase from what they've had for many decades. You've seen the threats from President Putin about the use of his nuclear force.
Remember how you all went after me when I said that was real?
And what in your view happened? Do you think he backed off because of that?
No, I'm just saying. I just found it interesting that Biden's being Biden's being extremist, and it turns out you all are writing about it now. Kind of fascinating.
I would expect you to do more of these in the future. Will you go to the southern border?
All right. President Biden heading out. A lot of questions being asked of him.